Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Weapons Expanded Heavy. For starters, you'll need to own the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and Harmony. Today we've got a Weapons Expanded rundown to tie into an upcoming Factions Expanded video, as these heavy weapons will pair perfectly alongside pirates. You've got 5 new weapons and 1 new bit of equipment to play with if you're going to use this mod. What makes heavy weapons different, I hear you asking? They're intentionally overpowered in their stat line, which is balanced back out by restricting who is able to equip them and how many uses they have before breaking. If you're using other mods that feature ways of repairing items, either directly or indirectly, like a repair bench from VFE Ancients or the repair shelf from the Spacer module of Vanilla Furniture Expanded, they'll kind of break this balancing aspect of heavy weapons, as you can use them and restore them to full condition between raids. All of the upsides with practically no downside. Consider a little bit of self-moderation if you want to use these in a sensible manner. So who can equip these weapons then? You'll need to meet one of 3 criteria. Either a pawn needs to be wearing a suit of powered armour, like Recon, Marine or Cataphract gear, they need to possess the Tough trait, or they need to wear a new bit of equipment included with this mod, the Exoskeleton frame. This exoskeleton frame's sole purpose is to improve stats and allow the use of heavy weaponry, so whilst it can be made to a higher quality, it does nothing but increase the value of it, meaning that in a weird way, you want any exoskeleton frames that you make to be awful quality, as they're cheaper to keep around the base and to keep equipped. So what stats does it provide? You're looking at a 5% boost to global work speed, 0.2 additional move speed, and 15 extra carrying capacity. If you aren't making use of a mod like Pick Up and Haul, this carrying capacity is going to feel somewhat wasted, as standard Rimworld logic won't tell pawns to put multiple different things in their pockets when bringing items back to a stockpile, so they'll rarely reach their carrying cap unless they're dragging a large stack of a single item back to the base. This frame is also classified as a utility for its layer, however it covers the torso slot on a pawn, meaning you're able to use this and another utility item together, like a shield belt or a smoke pot pack, as they cover the utility slot, not the torso. This is why systems that can show a paper doll for equipment are beneficial at times, as I'm sure many players have been confused over why certain equipment can't be worn together when others, like this, can. Anyway, onto the weapons themselves. They're all unlocked from different standard vanilla research that fits with their function. So let's go with the autocannon to kick things off, which you'll unlock by researching the autocannon turret. First off, you're going to notice that all of these heavy weapons have the offset when equipped of -0.2 to move speed. This is balanced back out if a pawn is wearing the exoskeleton. However, if you're using power armor or a pawn with the Tough trait to wield these weapons, always remember how much slower they're going to be. You don't want these things equipped all the time for day-to-day work. Ideally, they're sitting near your defensive setup on a shelf to deal with larger threats. Looking at the stats for normal quality, the autocannon is most effective in medium to short range encounters, with its biggest upside being that it has absolutely no aiming time. A group of pawns using these can lay down some simply biblical suppressive fire.
Let's rock!
Boasting a solid 40% armor penetration with 27 damage per shot on a 7-round burst, this normally lands enough of its shots on a target to remove something of importance from them. A leg, an arm, a head, you know, those things people need. The biggest problem with the autocannon is its large ranged cooldown, which can be triggered if the primary target goes down mid-burst, which places this weapon in a strange kind of limbo. You want to be aiming for a target that has the highest amount of collateral, ideally so that all 7 shots miss the intended target and wipe out those around them, which allows for a sustained volley fire into a large group of enemies, meaning this weapon is likely going to be wasted if you're firing at the tip of the spear. In terms of durability, it loses 1 condition per shot, with every heavy weapon having 100 max condition regardless of the quality. So you're going to get about 14 full bursts and a little bit of a sputter before this thing breaks, which for the cost of 150 steel, 20 plasteel and 3 components isn't exactly a lot of wiggle room to be wasting shots. You're going to find with the majority of heavy weapons that they are easier to repurpose from raiders, as building them yourself will likely fall into that hoarding consumable problem that many gamers have. You're less likely to be quite so precious over a consumable item that you've looted from an enemy, rather than one that you are hyper aware about the cost of using. Next up is the Uranium Slug Rifle, unlocked via the Uranium Slug turret research. Whereas the autocannon was quantity over quality, the Slug Rifle takes aim at high priority targets and absolutely obliterates them, provided you've put it on someone with a decent shooting skill. This weapon is all about long range, extreme long range, reaching 56 tiles out with a 98% accuracy over a long distance that will drop dramatically if enemies get within a short range. You'll want to keep any friendlies engaging in close combat well outside of this gun's firing line. Whilst, oddly, the slug rifle doesn't boast a great degree of stopping power, it rarely needs to stagger a target because it punches through 82% of armour for a massive 55 damage, likely obliterating anyone unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end. I find this primarily useful for the biggest of big game hunting, like Thrumbo, or dealing with mechanoid clusters from a very safe distance, as large body sizes will go a long way in helping to ensure that you waste 0 shots with this weapon. It'll chew through 10 durability every time you pull the trigger, so those 10 shots that it can deliver damn well need to count. This is still a pretty pricey weapon too, costing 100 steel, 15 plasteel, 40 uranium and 3 components. You'll need to be hyper aware of raiders that come in using this weapon. They'll usually sit so far back from the main strike force that the first time you notice them is when one of your colonists has their entire arm blown off from a bullet that appeared off screen. Now we've got the Heavy Flamer, unlocked via biofuel refining. There are a lot of different versions of flamethrowers in Rimworld now, introduced from both DLC and other mods. The Heavy Flamer operates slightly different in that it doesn't give you much of an indication as to its cone of damage before firing, whilst it seems to cover around 3 tiles of width from the point of firing to the desired target. So to get the most out of this weapon, you really want to be aiming at its longest possible range and keeping a choke point pinned down with it, as it does pretty poorly in open environments. The biggest downside to trying to use a Heavy Flamer is its absolutely absurd reload time, needing 8.4 seconds to change out the fuel canister. Its low accuracy is of pretty little concern, as it doesn't need a direct target to aim for, just a general direction. And whilst its initial fire damage may not be that massive, at only 12, it does start some absolutely huge fires on the targets that are unlucky enough to be caught in the blast, meaning they're going to be running for longer, spreading more fire as they do so, and spending more time trying to put themselves out. This will hopefully chain the Inferno down whatever conga line of raiders that you're funneling into the hotbox. As with the slug rifle, you'll get 10 shots with your flamer before it breaks, costing 80 steel, 2 components and 80 chem fuel to craft another, making it one of the cheapest heavy weapons. Here come the fun parts to use, but the horrifying things to face. Let's do the handheld mortar first. Unlocked via the mortar's research, this does exactly what it says on the tin. You're typically going to find these are the most concerning heavy weapons for raiders to bring in, as it allows them to stand at a range of 69 and lob shells over your walls, totally avoiding whatever nonsense defensive structures you've placed. Its durability will allow for 5 shots per handheld mortar, so waiting for raiders to expend their ammo isn't exactly the safest option, but it can be done in a pinch, especially if you've got overhead mounting to hide underneath. As you'd expect from an explosive weapon, it deals pretty massive damage with a bonus against structures, although its armor penetration isn't that stellar. Due to the nature of coverage from armor pieces, expect any of your pawns unlucky enough to be hit by one of these to feel it most on their hands or feet, as they are never covered by base game protection. Costing 60 steel, 2 components and 5 high explosive shells, if you want to make your own and use it perfectly against other enemy mortar users, you might potentially earn 5 more just from a single craft. That might is doing some considerably heavy lifting, however. Even if you earn just a single handheld mortar by building your own, it allows you to rinse and repeat the process, giving you a mobile defensive measure to deal with any raiders that turn up carrying this. Of course, you could instead build a stationary mortar. Just remember how much of a damage bonus handheld mortars will get against them, and it might potentially cause some chain explosions if they whiff a shot and hit your shell storage. Finally, we have the Swarm Missile Launcher, unlocked via multi-barrel weapons research. This thing is about as dangerous as you could possibly make an explosive weapon, with it firing micro missiles on a burst of 10. So whilst its projectiles don't deal a high amount of damage, the sheer volume of splashing explosive utterly ruins large clusters of raiders, or blows multiple holes into a large target, making them bleed to death in a couple of hours. Here comes the list of downsides for this launcher, however. Firstly, it behaves a little like the autocannon, in that if the target that it's aiming for dies, it triggers the ranged cooldown and stops firing. Fortunately, you can get around this by aiming at the floor to ensure that all 10 rockets are fired in a full salvo. Secondly, the missiles that it fires are ground level projectiles, so they can collide with things like trees, chunks, or an idiot friendly that decides to walk across the firing line, potentially wasting shots over areas that have a large amount of clutter. Thirdly, its range, aiming time and reload cooldown put the user in an incredibly precarious position that will likely see them get off a single volley, then be overrun or shot to pieces, so you naturally want to use this from a more defensible position, with the issue then becoming that this will utterly ruin whatever defensive layout you've made, blowing your kill box wide open for enemies to just waltz through. The final issue is the durability on this thing. It loses 5 condition per missile, meaning it can fire 2 full salvos before it's done, for a cost of 160 steel, 25 plasteel and 12 components. Oof. So where does that leave the Swarm Missile Launcher? Pretty solidly in the hands of a kill on sight when a raider has one kind of weapon, that you're unlikely to want to use in your own defensive matters, and not likely to use outside in open combat either, because of the obstructions. So it ends up becoming something that typically gets lobbed at traders for something less self-destruction-y. This thing is pretty much an awareness check during combat, because oh lordy do you soon find out if you missed a raider carrying one of these in the middle of a firefight. And those are your heavy weapon options, for when you need a real punch to get through enemy defenses, or when they need a real punch to get through yours. I mentioned pirates at the top of this video because this gives pawns that aren't entombed in a war casket the potential to fight back with some seriously heavy firepower. Uranium slug rifles might be one of the best options for taking down dangerous pirate threats, as they can cleave clean through even the sturdiest of armours. For everything else, you can just saturation fire the area with handheld mortars and let them all bleed to death. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.